The temperature dropped to -40. The sun disappeared for months, and your ancestors had no shelter, no fire technology, no synthetic insulation, and no way of knowing if the cold would ever end. They survived anyway, and the way they did it changed your biology, your psychology, and your relationship with darkness in ways you are still living with today. This is not a story about ancient hardship. It is a story about the most successful survival engineering project in the history of your species. And once you understand what your ancestors actually did to get through the Ice Age, the thing you call resilience will never feel like an abstract concept again. Here is what the textbooks give you. The last glacial maximum, the peak of the most recent Ice Age, occurred approximately 20,000 years ago. Global temperatures were on average 6 to 8 degrees Celsius colder than today. Sea levels were lower by roughly 120 meters, exposing vast land bridges between continents. Ice sheets covered large portions of North America, Europe, and Asia. The landscape that modern humans inhabited was not a gradual cold. It was a sustained, multi-generational, continent-spanning freeze that lasted for thousands of years. And modern humans not only survived it, they thrived in it. While Neanderthals, who had been living in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years and were arguably better physically adapted to cold climates, went extinct. Anatomically modern humans expanded their range, developed new technologies, created the earliest known cave art, and built the social and cognitive infrastructure that would eventually produce agriculture, cities, and everything that followed. The question that should stop you is not how they survived the cold. It is how they survived it better than a species that had been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years longer. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan at the University of Sydney has spent years studying the evolution of clothing as a survival technology. What his research shows is that clothing, not fire, not shelter, not tool complexity, was the primary technological innovation that allowed modern humans to outcompete Neanderthals in cold environments. Neanderthals almost certainly used animal skins for warmth, but the evidence suggests they used them simply as draped coverings rather than fitted garments. Modern humans, by contrast, developed tailored clothing, sewn, fitted, layered, using bone needles that appear in the archaeological record as early as 50,000 years ago. The difference between a draped skin and a sewn fitted garment in -40-degree conditions is not aesthetic. It is the difference between life and death. A fitted garment traps body heat against the skin, reduces wind penetration, and allows movement without losing insulation. A draped skin does none of these things reliably. The bone needle, a tiny, almost invisible artifact, represents one of the most consequential technological inventions in human prehistory. It allowed your ancestors to engineer their own microclimate, carrying warmth with them across a frozen landscape. But clothing was only the beginning. Archaeologist Olga Soffer, whose analysis of Paleolithic fiber technology reshaped how researchers understand the material culture of Ice Age humans, found evidence that ancient humans were weaving plant fibers into textiles as far back as 27,000 years ago. Not just animal skins, woven fabric, the cognitive and technical complexity required to produce woven textiles, understanding the properties of different plant fibers, developing consistent weaving techniques, maintaining the knowledge across generations, is far beyond what most people imagine when they picture Ice Age humans. Your ancestors were not huddled in caves wrapped in raw animal hides. They were wearing layered, engineered garments in a sophisticated textile tradition that took generations to develop and refine. And then there was the psychological problem. Because the Ice Age was not just a physical challenge, it was a cognitive and emotional one. Neuroscientist John Stins at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam has studied the psychological effects of prolonged darkness on the human brain, finding that extended periods of reduced light exposure produce measurable changes in mood, motivation, and cognitive function. During the last glacial maximum, populations living at high latitudes experienced winters where sunlight was available for only a few hours each day, or not at all for weeks at a time. The neurological toll of this, the suppression of serotonin, the dysregulation of circadian rhythms, the depression that follows extended darkness, was a survival challenge as real and as urgent as the physical cold. Your ancestors' response to this challenge is written into the archaeological record in the most striking way possible. The cave art at Lascaux, at Altamira, at Chauvet, created during or near the period of the last glacial maximum, represents an explosion of symbolic, narrative, and aesthetic expression that has no clear precedent in the earlier archaeological record. Horses and bison painted with astonishing naturalistic accuracy, hands stenciled onto cave walls, geometric patterns of unclear but consistent meaning. Archaeologist David Lewis Williams, whose work on the cognitive basis of Paleolithic cave art is among the most influential in the field, has argued that this art served a function beyond decoration. It was a technology of meaning. In conditions of extreme environmental stress, cold, darkness, scarcity, the constant proximity of death, the human brain needs narrative. It needs symbols. It needs shared representations of the world that bind the group together and give the suffering a frame that makes it survivable. The cave art of the Ice Age was not a leisure activity. It was infrastructure. It was the psychological technology that kept groups coherent under conditions designed to shatter them. Here is the truth drop, and it reframes something you have almost certainly been misunderstanding about your own capacity for difficulty. The modern world has largely eliminated the acute physical survival challenges that shaped your ancestors' psychology. You do not face -40 temperatures without shelter. You do not navigate months of darkness without artificial light. You do not watch your group members die of cold and starvation on a regular basis. And this elimination of acute challenge has produced something unexpected, a widespread loss of confidence in the capacity to endure difficulty at all. The smaller the challenges you regularly face, the larger the ordinary difficulties of modern life feel by comparison. Your ancestors did not survive the Ice Age because they were tougher than you in any simple sense. They survived because they had no choice but to develop every available cognitive and social resource: clothing technology, fire management, textile production, cooperative hunting, narrative art, shared meaning, and deploy all of it simultaneously against a problem that was trying to kill them every single day. The cognitive hardware they used to do all of that is the same hardware you are running right now. The bone needle that kept them alive in -40 is the same problem-solving intelligence that you use in a context that almost never demands its full capacity. So what do you do with this? The next time something feels insurmountable, a sustained difficulty, a period of darkness, a cold that seems like it will not end, notice what your ancestors actually did with those conditions. They did not simply endure. They invented, they built, they painted, they made meaning out of the worst conditions the climate had ever imposed on a human population, and they used that meaning to hold their groups together long enough to come out the other side. The temperature dropped to -40, the sun disappeared for months, and your ancestors, wearing sewn-fitted garments they had engineered with bone needles, painting horses on cave walls by firelight, holding each other together with stories and symbols in the dark. They survived anyway. You come from those people. Every single cognitive tool they developed to get through that night is still inside you. The only question is whether the difficulty you are currently facing is large enough to make you use it.